Thank you. Good morning. My name is Lise Vaugeois, and I'm the MPP for Thunder Bay Superior North. We are here this morning with two groups who are presenting a petition on the Proximity Principle, which is regarding the management of nuclear waste. The two groups here are We the Nuclear Free North and Protect Our Waterways, No Nuclear Waste. Speakers for these groups, Charlie Faust from We the Nuclear Free North and Bill Knoll from Protect Our Waterways. I'm going to pass the microphone to Charlie to start.
Thank you, Lise. High-level nuclear waste is a very dangerous material. It's produced in nuclear reactors, and it's extremely radioactive and very hazardous, and it lasts for hundreds of thousands of years. Bill is from Protect Our Waterways, and he's going to give you a few paragraphs.
Good morning. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization was formed back in 2002 based on a nuclear fuel waste owners in Canada. The major supplier of funds to the Nuclear Waste Management Organizations is the Ontario Power Generation Group, OPG. They represent really 90% of the total waste that is in storage across all of Canada, I guess. And they're also the major funders of the NWMO. So they provide 90% of that funds that are required. The NWMO spends about $160 million annually. They've spent well over $900,000 to date. In 2005, the NWMO released its plan. This was a plan that actually has been in generation since 1978. And they call it the Adaptive Phase Management. Then in 2007, actually that plan was approved by the Government of Canada, and it's called the Canada Plan. So it's to really store the high-level nuclear waste that is collected from the reactors, as already mentioned. The intention was to store this waste in a deep geological repository somewhere like 500 meters below the ground. And then once it's stored there and the project is finished, which might take 40 to 50 years as far as the actual transportation of the fuel to that location, the NWMO will plan to abandon the site. The process that the NWMO followed was really what they call a 9-step process. And what they were hoping was that process would lead to a community accepting their waste. So they've been in 22 communities as they started out. And this has developed really a very divisive or group within the communities. You have those that are supporting, those that are not, and neighbors don't talk to one another from time to time. But that's what the process has done. There's two remaining sites. There's the one in Ignace, Dryden, in northwestern Ontario, and the other site is in South Bruce in Teeswater, Ontario, where they plan to make a decision by 2024. The NWMO has promised that that's what they will do, to select a single site for the storage of this. Charles, back to you.
Thank you, Bill. So the part of the site planning process by NWMO is finding an informed and willing host. What they've done is gone out to small communities, in particular in Ignace and Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation, who have very little tax base and very few resources, and they've been basically bankrolling the communities for projects, and in exchange for listening to their project, and in hopes that they will accept them as a willing host. We see this as a very unfair and undemocratic process. The plan is not very well defined for their deep geological repository, and it has several very questionable areas, one of which is an option for a shallow cavern, which, if approved, could see nuclear waste being moved into the area before the deep geological repository is actually complete and in operation. Another of our major concerns is transportation. I want you to remember 1,694. That's the number of kilometers that it takes, that it would take one-way trip from the average site of nuclear waste storage in Ontario, southern Ontario, to the Ignace area. 1,694 kilometers. They're proposing 2 to 3 trucks a day, every day, for 50 years. And that's to deal with the 50,000 tons that are out there right now looking for a place to be deposited. They will continue to produce the waste, and we expect that to double in those 50 years. Bill?
So the NWMO proposed to transfer this waste in transport containers from the existing nuclear reactor sites to wherever the chosen site is for the DGR. Then once you reach the DGR location, they will then remove the fuel bundles from the container and repackage them in a final container that will be put into the DGR site. This is all very interesting information from a point of view that there's nowhere else in this world that anyone has experience with the DGR. So this is a novel idea. It's been in research for at least 50 years. It started back in 1978, actually, with Atomic Energy of Canada Limited. And so they're finally getting around to doing it. But the repackaging facility is really unique. No other country, Sweden, Finland, or any other country that I'm aware of, is actually thinking about doing this repackaging capability in what is a very small container. From a point of view, you're putting 52 bundles of the fuel in this container and then transporting it from the repackaging facility down through an elevator into its final resting spot in a cavity. And even in the cavity, you've got to watch how you put it. The big issue with nuclear fuel, spent fuel, is the heat that's generated. So this is one of the real issues with the whole idea of how long it will last, is a function of how much heat will be generated and how much damage that heat will do to not only the rock, but also to the container itself. So Charles, back to you.
Thank you, Bill. So our two groups have been collecting petitions since August of last year. We've brought those petitions to the legislature of Ontario right now, and we are asking the Ontario government to apply the proximity principle with respect to the management of nuclear waste. And this is a high-level nuclear waste. The proximity principle is acknowledged in the European government for waste management, and in some cases actual nuclear waste management in Scotland, for example. But the proximity principle directs that radioactive waste should be managed as close to the point of generation as technically feasible. The proximity principle has been embedded in the European Community Strategy for Waste Management since the 1990s. There is a viable alternative to the transportation and burial of high-level radioactive wastes. Nuclear fuel waste should be managed at the point of generation by making on-site storage more robust and adopting a program of rolling stewardship for the long-term monitoring and management of radioactive waste at or near its current location. That is what we're asking the Ontario government to do. That's what we are asking the Ontario Power Generation, who owns 90% of this waste, to do. And that's what we're asking the Nuclear Waste Management Organization to do. The Ontario Power Generation, Nuclear Waste Management Organization, and the Atomic Energy Canada before them had only one solution ever to this, to dig a hole in the ground and bury it. And we don't find that acceptable. Please.
Thank you very much. So we know that the process of approving where a deep geological repository is going to be is undemocratic. It's being left to a very small number of people, where this actually affects people across the entire province when you consider that the waste will be transported across major highways in Ontario over a period of 50 years. So there's that risk. There's the process that's problematic, and the fact that the plans actually, we've looked at the plans for Sweden, for example, and that includes a way to actually access the waste once it's been buried. In the Ontario plan, once it's buried, it's sealed there, there's no way to monitor what is actually happening. And if there are leakages into groundwater, into any of the life-sustaining systems, it's going to be far too late to do anything about it, and extremely technically very difficult to remediate after the fact. So, we feel, and I feel, that the information we've gotten from the Nuclear Waste Management Organization is incomplete and set up really to divide communities to solve their problem, which is to find a place to bury the waste. But this is not a solution that is safe for anyone, really. And this is why there's so much resistance against it. So I will see if we've got questions and take it from there. Thank you.
Sorry, no questions. No one on the line.
Okay. I think I've got one last thing to say. Because there was an article that came out this week saying that the Nuclear Waste Management Organization has actually been talking with people in the United States about Canada taking nuclear waste from the United States and then disposing of it here. Now, what that tells us is that the Americans have already decided that they don't want to deal with it. They looked for 20 years at burying it in Yucca Mountain, and that didn't go anywhere. It was not approved and will not get approved. So it does tell you that there are a lot of issues out there that have not yet been resolved, and they need to be resolved. I just want to mention a little bit of detail about rolling stewardship. Rolling stewardship recognizes that a solution to the problem does not yet exist, and it ensures that there's continual monitoring of the waste. Retrieval is anticipated and actively planned for, and periodic repackaging is an integral part of the process. If leakage occurs, timely corrective action will be taken. Rolling stewardship is based on persistence of memory. Information is readily transmitted to the next generation, and it's an ongoing reminder that the problem remains to be solved. So we want to make sure that the waste is monitored and that it's not left buried and getting lost from memory, where it will be, again, risk for future generations without them having the knowledge or capacity to address any problems that come from it. We're good.
Okay, we're good. Thank you, Lise. That's very, very important to stress. I've been at this for a long time, going back to 1988, 1989, 1991, different projects, different players. As I mentioned, there's only ever been one option considered, and that is to create a cavern underground, bury it, and seal it, and walk away. There is a better option, but part of the issue also is where are we going with with the waste? In 70 years, they have not been able to figure out what to do with it. Now, our federal government is talking and supporting and putting money into research for small modular reactors, which create yet another kind of waste. Now, we have to look at our energy future, and one of the big factors in that discussion is waste. And from what I'm hearing, the new types of waste that will be coming out of the proposed small modular reactors is going to cause even more incompatibility issues and concerns. So I think I think our governments need to take this situation seriously and open up a discussion to the population and to try and understand exactly what we want to do and recognize this as a problem that you can't just sweep under the rug. Is there anyone else? Bill, did you have anything?
Yeah, just one other comment, I guess. In hindsight, it's taken 50 years to get to this point. So, you have to ask yourself, well, what's the rush? So why do we need to bury this waste right now or plan to bury it? Now, this is a problem that's not created by the people of Ontario or the people of Canada. It's one created by the nuclear industry. And so to solve their problem so they can think about expansion, this is what they need to do. So they are rushing through for no good reason. I've always told them that why not let Finland, who is by far more advanced in its application of a DGR than Canada. And the NWMO would acknowledge that. They would say that they're not the leaders from a technology point of view. What they are, in their opinion, is the leaders of social engagement. And that's what they're selling to our neighbors south of us and to the rest of the countries around us. So it's very important that we think about that. The comment by the NWMO always is, well, we've created the problem as a generation, so we owe it to our future generations to solve the problem now. Well, my issue is, are we giving our future generation a problem to solve when they have no benefit at all of the electricity that's being generated by nuclear facilities? So, that's always been my complaint to the NWMO, and the fact is that there's very little information about the amount of radiation that will be escaping from not only the DGR itself, from the transportation of the fuel, but also in the repackaging facility. And as I mentioned, the repackaging facility is really unique. So, they also say that, well, we can depend on other countries to tell us what to do. Well, there's so much difference in the container, all of the designs associated with the whole idea of a DGR is different in Canada than Sweden or Finland or those countries that are leading in this implementation. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Lisa.
So we've brought down, I'd like to actually ask, we have a contingent of 17 people who have come down from both the South Bruce Teeswater and the Northwestern Ontario. I'd like to ask if anyone have anything to add when we to what we've discussed here. But before doing that, I'd like to tell you that we started collecting these petitions in August of last year. We had to make a change in the format to our petition to conform to a format that's acceptable to the Ontario Legislature. So the first 900 or so petitions that we assigned, signatures that we collected, are not going to be presented today. Even though it's the same petition, the same wording, same everything, we had to redraft the petition to a format that does comply. And since that time, since October, we've collected approximately 1,200. So So we're talking, as far as we're concerned, over 2,000 signatures in a short period of time. And they'll be presented in the House today at 3 o'clock. Are there any comments from our group? If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. I'm Brene Lloyd from Northwatch, and we are part of We the Nuclear Free North. There's lots of different ways we can characterize this project, but I think one way to characterize it is the tension between certainty and uncertainty. On the one hand, we have the industry's quest for certainty. They had a failed siting process in the 80s, a failed concept in the 1990s. So they learned lessons from that, and they designed a process where they would achieve certainty, they hope, they expect, around their social license. So they're looking for certainty. Their entire 9-step siting process, and we're in step 3.5, is designed to give them certainty. On the other hand, for the public, for the rest of us, this project is about uncertainty. It's about uncertainty, risks, and unknowns. There is not an element of this project which we can say, this is what the NWMO is going to do. They use something they call reference cases, and a reference case can change. That's its nature. So we have uncertainty around, let's begin with the transfer of the waste from the storage it's in now to the transportation containers. There is nothing disclosed about how that transfer will take place, which should be a real concern to the reactor communities. We have uncertainty with the transportation containers. The regulator and the NWMO like to describe these as being certified, and there's an international set of safety tests. They leave out that these containers have never been subject to those safety tests. There are 3 containers. Only one of them is certified. One of them is a concept, not yet even designed. And the third is the dry storage containers, which they talked about in the 1980s as using, but they've seemed to have revised that. Huge uncertainties around the risks of transportation. Then we get to the site, the transfer that Bill talked about. The used fuel packaging plant is, again, it's a concept. They don't have a design. They expect to find a community to be informed and willing by 2024, and yet they can't describe even the first 2 basic elements of their project. Then we get to the deep geological repository. Oh, they have not yet described or determined or designed how they will actually transfer the waste from the used fuel packaging plant to the underground. They just say it'll go on a trolley and go underground. Well, any one of us could write that sentence. Then we get to the underground, and there are huge unknowns around what will, how the waste will, and the waste containers will degrade over time, what the effects of that will be. In the 1990s, we went through an 8-year process, a 13-month hearing. And the end of that hearing, I think there was a consensus between civil society and industry that there was not a debate about whether there will be releases. We often call them leaks, but they're radioactive releases. There's not a debate about whether there will be releases. The debate is about how soon, how much, and how much of effect will those releases have. There will be releases. The NWMO can't quantify that, won't quantify that, but we do know that that underground environment is going to be so radioactive that workers cannot be present when the wastes are being in place. Again, this is all concept, it's all under design, it's under development. The NWMO can say that the waste will be placed using robotically operated forklifts. They know that, and they know that because they've already determined it'll be too radioactive for workers to be present. But they don't know where those will be operated from. Will it be from someplace else underground? Will it be from surface? Will it be from headquarters in Toronto? Can't say. And then the real uncertainties come over time. If we manage to not have an accident, we'll have bystander effect from radiation from the transportation trucks, but if we don't have a catastrophic accident at transportation, if we don't have a catastrophic accident in the used fuel packaging plant, if we don't have a catastrophic accident in transferring to underground, we will have ongoing radioactive releases, doses, exposures at every step along the way. But if we don't have catastrophic accidents at any step, then we're left to the long, slow, steady release of radionuclides from the underground. And then the uncertainty is, where do those releases report? Do they go to the Wabagoon watershed, the Rainy Lake, Lake Huron? Where are they going to report? But they will report. They will come to surface. So the project for the public is all about uncertainty. There will be uncertainties when we employ the proximity principle. There are uncertainties about the condition of the waste in the current dry storage containers. There will be uncertainty, but they will be uncertainties that can be managed, that can be monitored, and can be remediated. That is where we will get greater certainty, is by following the proximity principle and keeping the waste at the reactor site where there is capacity and there is greater ability to actually respond to the unknowns that will certainly emerge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernine. So I think we're getting probably close now.
Yes, we are.
I'd just like to finish by saying that there is an alternative, that the Ontario Power Generation and the Nuclear Waste Management Organization just won't try.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We will be presenting, Sol Mamakwa, myself, and Mike Schreiner will be presenting the petition this afternoon. Looking forward to doing it.